Ask yourself, when did you last see an electric vehicle on the road? Now, when it comes down to electric cars, the answer is probably earlier today, isn't it? But what about motorcycles? It's not quite the same answer. I've been digging into some government figures. These are published by the government, the DFT, that show the breakdown of vehicles that are licensed on the road currently. So this is not sales figures, this is the numbers of vehicles that are actually on the road, and it is broken down by electric and conventional engines. So if you look at for cars, what you can see that fully battery electric cars on the road in the UK is at 1.8 million. So it's hardly surprising that you see those vehicles on the road, is it? But what do the figures look like for electric motorcycles? Well, what you can see is that the numbers, oh actually no, you can't see, can you? And that's the problem. Compared to the 1.8 million cars on the road, electric cars on the road, motorcycles just don't register on the graph. But I can assure you they are there on that graph. If we zoom in on that axis where it's measured in millions, and we actually go down to looking at this in thousands of vehicles, you can see that yes, the motorcycle line, it is there. It does exist. It is actually there. So there are electric motorcycles on the road for you to spot. So currently, this is at the end of Q1 for 2026, there's 13,243 electric motorcycles on the road compared to 1.8 million electric cars. But to be fair, looking at the exact numbers, the finite numbers, is probably a little bit of an unfair comparison between cars and motorcycles. What we should be looking at is the proportion of the fleet. We all know that the number of cars on the road vastly outweighs the number of motorcycles, so there's no getting away from that. So what we should really be looking at is what proportion of the fleet of cars compared to the fleet of motorcycles has actually gone electric. Now for cars, as you can see from this graph, the percentage of electric cars compared to all cars is around 5.5% now. Now, the fact that it's crossed that 5% line is quite interesting because this is a key thing in terms of how often you spot things. When we did our research into safety in numbers and looking at bus lane access and such like, we came across an academic paper that shows that 5% is the prevalence that you need before people start noticing a vehicle in a particular location. So this isn't just a motorcycle specific finding. This is actually a research that carried out that actually showed the same effect exists for buses in bus lanes. So yes, 5% of vehicles in the bus lane being buses actually makes them visible. Strangely enough, it's got nothing to do with the size of the vehicle, it's got to do with the prevalence of the vehicle. So the fact that electric cars have hit 5% of the share for cars on the road means that you are spotting them. So what do the figures look like for motorcycles? Well, as we can see, again, the government, the DFT statistics are there, but the reality is that for motorcycles, we've barely crossed the 1% line. In fact, Q1 of 2026, we're sitting at 0.99% of motorcycles on the road in the UK being electric. So it's hardly surprising that you don't really spot them. Now, if we go back to our graph for the actual numbers of electric motorcycles on the road, what you can see that there was a period of strong growth, wasn't there? When I say strong growth, it's growth that existed, shall we say. But there's a definite area that you can see that in Q1 of 2023, there was a definite stall in that growth. And then back in Q3 of 2024, we hit peak electric motorcycles on the road at 14,283 electric motorcycles licensed to be ridden on the road in the UK. But since that point, we've seen a decline. Every single quarter since, we've actually seen a decline. And we're now down to the 13,243 electric motorcycles on the road compared to the peak of 14,283. So there has to be a question asked about why has this growth stalled? Now, the first thing that most people will probably raise is the actual plug-in grant. Obviously, we know that there was grants for electric cars, and we know that there were also grants for electric motorcycles. Now, through the period of this last decade, the grant for electric motorcycles started off at £1,500. And that carried through straight the way through into the beginning of this growth period for electric motorcycles. But then in December of 2021, that grant was cut to £500. The interesting thing is, if you look at the graph, you can see that there's actually no difference in terms of the growth for electric motorcycles through that change. So, yes, there may be a lag in it, but it would only be a couple of months in terms of the sales figures. So this growth in the electric vehicles or electric motorcycles on the road doesn't seem to be driven by the plug-in grant. So this leads me to my hypothesis as to why this stall came when it did. And it comes down to government policy. If you look, the consultation to ban the sale of non-electric motorcycles was actually run by the government between the 14th of July and the 21st of September in 2022. And that coincides exactly with the point where the stall in the growth existed. That's where it stalled, at the point that that consultation was running. This is the point where vague discussions about going electric on motorcycles was turned into, I would argue, a threat, where there was going to be a cut-off date, a mandated end to the sale of petrol motorcycles. So it would appear, I would suggest, that decision, that policy decision, although it hasn't been formalised, led to actually a stalling in the growth of electric motorcycles in the UK. And you can argue that this is no coincidence. I don't think it's a coincidence. The fact that we've gone on and still not made a decision is probably what led to the fact that we hit peak electric motorcycles in the UK back in 2024. And we've seen 18 months of decline in terms of the actual numbers of electric motorcycles on the road in the UK. So amusingly, for all those critics of MAG who say that we should never have opposed this, we should have been supporting electric motorcycles, that ban, or that threat of a ban, seems to be the one thing that has prevented the growth of electric motorcycles in the UK. So yes, everybody, no matter what your position on electric motorcycles, love them or hate them, want them or think they're the future, it's irrelevant. Bin the ban is the correct thing to do. If you bin the ban, there's no mandate, there's no forcing it, but it would actually probably allow a growth in a market that is currently being cut off at the knees. Join MAG and support us to do this work. It's important work, no matter where you stand on the electric vehicle argument.